Elements are pure substances that cannot be decomposed by chemical changes. The elements serve as the building blocks of matter. Each element has characteristic properties. The elements are organized into groups based on similar chemical properties. This organization of elements is the periodic table. First main idea. The periodic table organizes elements by their chemical properties. Each small square of the periodic table shows the symbol for an element and its atomic number. For example, the first square at the upper left represents element 1. This element has the symbol capital H and is called hydrogen. As you look through the table, you will see many familiar elements, including iron, represented by capital Fe, sodium, represented by a capital Na, neon, represented by a capital Ne, silver, represented by a capital Ag, copper, represented by a capital Cu, aluminum, represented by a capital Al, sulfur, represented by a capital S, and lead, represented by a capital Pb. As you can see, sometimes the symbol for an element, such as those for neon and sulfur, is directly related to its name. Other symbols have arisen from the element's name in other modern languages or from ancient Latin or German names. For example, the symbol for iron, which is capital Fe, comes from the Latin word ferrum. The vertical columns of the periodic table are called groups. The elements in a group are referred to as a family. As you examine the periodic table, you will notice that the groups are numbered from 1 to 18, from left to right. Each group contains elements with similar chemical properties. For example, the elements in group 2 are beryllium, Be, magnesium, Mg, calcium, Ca, strontium, Sr, barium, Ba, and radium, Ra. All of these elements are metals. They tend to react quickly with other elements and bond to other kinds of atoms in similar ways. The horizontal rows of elements in the periodic table are called periods. Physical and chemical properties change in a somewhat regular pattern as you move from left to right across a period. Elements that are close to each other in the same period tend to be more similar than elements that are farther apart. For example, the period 2 elements, lithium, Li, and beryllium, Be, which are in groups 1 and 2 respectively, have somewhat similar properties. However, their properties are very different from the properties of fluorine, F, which is the period 2 element in group 17. The two sets of elements placed below the periodic table make up what are called the lanthanide series and the actinide series. These metallic elements fit into the table just after elements 57 and 89. They are placed below the table to keep the table from being too wide. Second main idea. Some elements are metals. The periodic table is broadly divided into two main sections, metals and nonmetals. The metals are at the left and in the center of the table. The nonmetals are toward the right. Some elements, such as boron, B, and silicon, Si, show characteristics of both metals and nonmetals. A metal is an element that is a good electrical conductor and a good heat conductor. At room temperature, most metals are solids. Most metals are also malleable, meaning that they can be hammered or rolled into thin sheets. Metals also tend to be ductile, making it possible for them to be drawn into a fine wire. Metals behave this way because they have high tensile strength, which is the ability to resist breaking when pulled. Most metals also have a silvery or grayish-white luster or shine. Though metals generally share these properties, they are diverse. Mercury is a liquid at room temperature. The metals in group 1 are soft enough that they can be cut with a knife. Some metals, such as manganese, are brittle. Instead of being silvery, gold and copper shine yellow and reddish-brown, respectively. Copper, a typical metal. Copper has a characteristic reddish color and a metallic luster. It is found naturally in minerals such as chalcopyrite and malachite. Pure copper melts at 1,083 degrees Celsius and boils at 2,567 degrees Celsius. It can be readily drawn into fine wire, pressed into thin sheets, and formed into tubing. Copper conducts electricity with little loss of energy. Copper remains unchanged in pure, dry air at room temperature. When heated, it reacts with oxygen in air. It also reacts with sulfur and the elements in group 17 of the periodic table. The green coating on a piece of weathered copper comes from the reaction of copper with oxygen, carbon dioxide, and sulfur compounds. Copper is also an essential mineral in the human diet. Third main idea. Some elements are nonmetals or metalloids. A nonmetal is an element that is a poor conductor of heat and electricity. The periodic table includes many more metals than nonmetals. Many nonmetals are gases at room temperature. These include nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, and chlorine. One nonmetal, bromine, is a liquid. The solid nonmetals include copper, phosphorus, selenium, sulfur, and iodine. These solids tend to be brittle rather than malleable and ductile. Phosphorus, a typical nonmetal. Phosphorus is one of 5 solid nonmetals. Pure phosphorus is known in 2 common forms. Red phosphorus is a dark red powder that melts at 597 degrees Celsius. White phosphorus is a waxy solid that melts at 44 degrees Celsius. Because it ignites in air at room temperature, white phosphorus is stored underwater. Phosphorus is too reactive to exist in pure form in nature. It is present in huge quantities in phosphate rock, where it is combined with oxygen and calcium. All living things contain phosphorus. Metalloids. A metalloid is an element that has some characteristics of metals and some characteristics of nonmetals. As you look from the left to right on the periodic table, you can see that the metalloids are found between the metals and the nonmetals. All metalloids are solids at room temperature. They tend to be less malleable than metals, but not as brittle as nonmetals. Some metalloids, such as antimony, have a somewhat metallic luster. Metalloids tend to be semiconductors of electricity. That is, their ability to conduct electricity is intermediate between that of metals and that of nonmetals. Metalloids are used in the solid-state circuitry found in desktop computers, digital watches, televisions, and radios. Noble gases. The elements in group 18 of the periodic table are the noble gases. These elements are generally unreactive. Low reactivity makes the noble gases very different from the other families of elements. Group 18 elements are gases at room temperature. Neon, argon, krypton, and xenon are all used in lighting. Helium is used in party balloons and weather balloons because it is less dense than air.